Thank you so much, President Beheshti. In the short time allotted to me, I'd like to give a brief overview of the teaching of the Catholic Church regarding religious liberty. As a follower of Jesus Christ, I recall that he declared that we would be persecuted and we would be blessed if we suffered persecution because of his name. Jesus gave us no guarantee that our rights would be respected. During the first 300 years of our existence, martyrdom was an essential part of Christian spirituality. We Catholics recall with pride that Peter, the first pope, and Paul, the great evangelizer, both gave their lives for the faith, as did thousands of others. Religious liberty was not on the radar then, or indeed for most of our history. Over the centuries, we have persecuted others for their faith, and we have been persecuted by others for ours. And while Catholic theology on this topic has developed over time, it is striking that our most comprehensive official teaching on religious liberty only goes back 50 years to the Second Vatican Council's Declaration on Religious Liberty, Dignitatis Humanae, which in Latin means the dignity of the human person. American Catholics recall with pride that this document of the Universal Church was drafted largely by an American priest, John Courtney Murray, who pushed for an American understanding of religious freedom drawn from the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Dignitatis Humanae seeks to address the challenge of spreading the Christian faith while respecting democratic societies and growing religious pluralism. It asserts three fundamental rights: freedom of conscience, freedom to live one's faith individually and in community without interference, and the autonomy of religious institutions. All three of these are threatened in the world today. Freedom of conscience means that no one may force us to do what conscience forbids or forbid us to do what conscience requires, which is not the same thing as what conscience allows, and that within due limits. Examples of limits for the common good to things which some consciences might allow include having a minimum age for marriage and prohibiting the marriage of siblings and first cousins and prohibiting the marriage of persons of the same gender. Conscience does not require underage, incestuous, or same-sex unions, all of which are contrary to natural law. The right and obligation to follow the requirements of our conscience is rooted in our inalienable, God-given dignity as a human person. This does not mean, however, that we can always do whatever we want. Objective truth determines what is right or wrong. And decisions based on what is objectively false bring with them natural consequences that are destructive of the human person and of society. And in this, we have an obligation to speak out, to protect the common good. For example, the Catholic Church opposes same-sex marriage not because it hates those who experience same-sex attraction, and not because we seek to perpetuate sinful discrimination against them. Quite the contrary. We oppose it because natural law, God's will for human behavior revealed in the very way He created our world, in this case the physical and sexual complementarity of the human person necessary for procreation, dictates our position that marriage is a holy endeavor between one man and one woman. Now our government and society are abandoning this objective truth regarding marriage, which had been held as self-evident by virtually all cultures from the very dawn of human existence. And despite our First Amendment rights, some who refuse to accept this truth attempt to discredit and silence us by stigmatizing unjustly Catholics and others who will not bend to the direction of today's winds, and characterize us as instead motivated by hatred and intolerance. The Church's opposition to the contraceptive mandate of the Department of Health and Human Services is another application of this principle. That mandate intends to require us to participate in the provision of insurance for morally objectionable medical services, artificial contraception, non-medically indicated sterilizations, and abortions in some circumstances. Whether by providing this coverage directly or by an action that would serve to trigger that provision by a third party, forcing us to participate in what conscience forbids. Second, the freedom to live one's faith individually and in community without interference. The function of government is to provide for the common good. But when it presumes to direct or inhibit religious acts, it exceeds the limits of its authority. Our religious bodies have the right to govern themselves according to their own norms, to instruct members in their faith, to give corporate witness to their faith without hindrance, and to welcome new converts. Note that freedom of worship is only one element of religious freedom. Individuals and religious bodies have a God-given right to live our faith without hindrance in every area of life, including the manner in which we conduct our business, the schools which our children attend and the way we operate our schools, and in the way that healthcare services are provided. Here, the historical record of the Catholic Church in some Catholic countries is not good, especially during the medieval period. In those days, theologians held that charity required us to do all in our power to eradicate error, even enlisting government coercion in order to save society from the infection of error and for the eternal welfare of those who are headed for perdition due to idolatry or heresy or schism. But sadly, history teaches us that we can justify just about anything when we put ourselves in God's place. Deus vult, God wills it, was the rallying cry of the First Crusade. This mentality also gave us the Inquisition. And worse, this mentality also left an opening for the ongoing demonization of those who are different, leading to every form of marginalization and discrimination, and ultimately in Europe to the Holocaust. We Catholics have learned what is at stake when religious liberty is not protected. We know because not only have we been guilty historically of denying religious liberty to others, we have also been on the losing side of this dynamic in Protestant countries and continue to lack full religious freedom in many non-Christian countries today. Indeed, in some parts of Asia and Middle East, Catholics still lack even the legal freedom to worship in public. The same is true for members of many other religious minorities. In much of Latin America during the 20th century, the church was the target of governmental persecution. Guatemala produced thousands of martyrs in the 1980s, including Father Stanley Rother, an Oklahoma priest who I know, or knew, whose cause for canonization is now in Rome. Now the church in Latin America is being attacked by drug cartels. 3 priests have been killed recently in southern Mexico. So governments are not the only threat to religious liberty. Here in the United States, the church is not yet a target of overt persecution, but the secular climate is becoming more hostile. And here the threat comes not from rival religious groups, as in the past, but rather from an aggressive secularism that seeks to discredit and undermine faith of any sort. Third, the autonomy of religious institutions. Religious freedom is exercised in a pluralistic world, and so is subject to certain regulatory norms designed to assist in the exercise of our rights and to protect the rights of others. Therefore, the autonomy of religious institutions is not absolute. For instance, when there is proof of some violation of the rights of others, or a public peace, or a public morality, as in the case of our scandalous clergy sexual abuse crisis. Apart from this necessary restriction of religious liberty in order to meet the requirements of justice and to safeguard the rights and freedoms of others, in all other matters, people should be free to act on their own judgment, so long as they don't use that freedom as a pretext for refusing to submit to legitimate authority in matters relating to the common good. Dignitatis Humanae insists, religious freedom ought, therefore, to have this further purpose and aim, namely that men may come to act with greater responsibility in fulfilling their duties in community life. My basic message, therefore, and that of the Catholic Church on the topic of religious liberty is inescapable. No one may licitly force us to do what conscience forbids or forbid us to do what conscience requires. We should be free to live our faith in every area of life without undue interference, not just while at worship. And religious institutions should enjoy full autonomy, limited only as needed to protect the rights of others. But you know, one major thing is missing from this presentation. Namely, Jesus' even more fundamental invitation to love one another as I have loved you. Meaning completely, selflessly, to the point of laying down our lives for others. And that is where human freedom resides most fully. And so while we recall with pride that religious liberty is our first and greatest freedom as Americans, it's also important to remember that Jesus warned us not to expect the world to change just in order to accommodate us. Indeed, he warns us that the world will hate us when we speak a truth that people don't want to hear. And should this result in persecution, we should feel blessed and not be surprised. It has happened before. And as we see from current events, it may happen again.